Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. I research, write, and interview podcast guests on the topics of parenting, happiness, and summer camp. In episode 10 of the podcast, I'm interviewing one of my favorite parenting authors and speakers, Michael G Thompson, Ph.D. Michael is a consultant, author, and psychologist specializing in children and families. He's the supervising psychologist for the Belmont Hill School and has worked in more than 700 schools across the United States as well as internationally. He is well known in the camp industry as someone who is a proponent of summer camp and someone who really understands both the benefits of camp and how hard it can be as a parent to send your child to camp. In today's interview, we're talking about his book, Homesick and Happy, How Time Away from Parents Can Help a Child Grow. Hi, Michael. This is Audrey.
Hi, Audrey.
So great to talk with you again. You are one of my idols in the parenting and camp world, and I have loved hearing you speak and reading your books over all these years.
Well, that, of course, is very gratifying to me, but I have tremendous respect for what camp people do and the difference they make in the lives of children, and so I'm always glad to have a chance to celebrate that.
Well, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to chat with me. What I want to ask you about specifically today is a book that you wrote about, I think it was about 5 years ago. It's called Homesick and Happy, How Time Away from Parents Can Help a Child Grow. And
right.
I, of course, loved your book, and I have about 25 sticky notes in it and lots of highlights because it really resonated with me as a camp director, and so many of your messages are really great for parents. Why don't you tell us, first of all, just why did you write the book?
There were a number of psychologists who were criticizing American parenting for being too much helicopter parenting, too protective, and it kind of came to a crescendo in a wonderfully researched book by Hara Morano called A Nation of Wimps. Mm-hmm. And she really attacked American parenting as overprotective, and not trusting kids to be resilient. And then there was that lady in New York who did the free-range parenting
Lenore
thing that drove everybody crazy. I forget her name. But anyway, I thought you don't change parents while parenting, punching them in the nose. And that's not going to really win people over. So you have to give them a more positive take on it. I started asking parenting audiences to think for a moment about the sweetest experience in their childhood. Well, what is the sweetest moment of your childhood? And people would say, childhood. And people would say to me, what do you mean sweet? I said, come on, just play with me. What was the sweetest moment of your childhood? Land on something. Kind of a free association test. And then I'd say to them, for how many of you were your parents present for that sweetest moment? And about 20% of the hands in the room would go up. And that's 80% of people, the sweetest moment in their childhood is when they were away from their parents. Away from their parents, with friends, doing something their parents might not have approved of, something developmentally challenging, even risky, where a child feels like he or she is in control and leading. I mean, I had a woman who said the sweetest moment of my childhood was when I was 11. I was with my two little cousins. It was in the summer, and we were walking through a field of high grass, and all of a sudden, the grass got so high that we couldn't see anything. We were lost. We didn't know where we were. And she said, after a moment of panic, I realized I had to get my cousins home. It was my job to find the trail. And that was the sweetest moment of her childhood. Well, that's not, where your mom's cooking you a wonderful meal. That's where you are facing a challenge on your own and surmounting it, mastering it. And I wanted to remind everybody that for many of us, that we love our parents to pieces, the sweetest moments of our childhood were where we had independence from them. So rather than trying to peel parents off kids by criticizing them, I said, I'm going to write a book that reminds parents of how lovely it is to be away from home. Well, what's the most common away from home experience? It's camp. So that's why I wrote Homesick and Happy.
Right. Well, that is wonderful. And I have to tell you, Michael, that I was at the ACA conference in San Diego, I don't know, in the early 2000s. And I vividly remember doing that activity that you just described with you. And I have written about it on numerous occasions because...
Have you really?
Yes, it really struck
Well, what was your sweetest moment, Audrey?
Well, I have so many, but there was a creek behind my home when I was a young child. And I used to go back there and hike around and try to catch frogs and name them and keep them as pets. And it was outdoors and exploring, and for sure my parents were nowhere around.
Right. And I used to summer by a lake in Massachusetts, and I was an early riser in a family of late sleepers. My older brother was always a late sleeper. And so I was this early riser, and I would get up in a rowboat and paddle down to the end of the lake and around the corner. I was out of sight. It was a sort of a T-shaped lake, and I'd go down one of the arms of the T, and I would fish by myself in the morning. And that was pretty sweet. You know, I owned the place. Just the way you owned your creek.
Right.
And that psychological ownership is something that this constantly attentive and attuned parenting actually robs a child of. And parents are not aware in the slightest of robbing their children of something by being at every game, being, never missing a town soccer game. But the truth is, sometimes kids just won't do it on their own and come home and tell you about it. Or not tell you about it, but it's theirs.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I've had my son tell me before, I really don't want you to come to this game.
Yeah, I really. Yeah, that's nice.
So I am with you. I think it helps having a lot of kids. Sometimes you absolutely can't be at all their things, so it sort of works out that you have to divide and conquer. And so maybe sometimes that benefits them, that they don't get too much attention when there's multiple of them. So there's a part of your book that I really like, especially. It talks about how these experiences, like at camp, can be so amazing for kids, but meanwhile, it's often harder on the parents. And that's been my experience as a camp director, that when I'm talking to these parents of first-time campers, they seem to be in a lot more emotional pain than their campers. So maybe, I mean...
It's not homesickness, it's child sickness.
Exactly.
That causes the suffering.
Yes, and so you have some really great wisdom in here, and that's something that I want to kind of send parents to as they read your book, is this, I think it's chapter 10, it's called Homesick and Happy, and you have some great wisdom starting with, give your child the gift of letting him or her go.
Yes.
And I think that, it's not just camp, it's kind of everything in life. My son recently learned to drive, and it's really scary letting your kids drive, even though, they have their license. But, they're not very experienced. And it's just like, but you have to let them start. You have to, once they've learned the skills and demonstrated that they're responsible, you've got to let them go, even though it's really, really hard.
Very hard. I remember it very well. Terrifying.
Okay, well, so I'm definitely going to keep recommending your book, Homesick and Happy. I also just want to touch on, you have so many amazing books, especially about boys. Can you touch on any that are your favorites, or if you were sending parents to one book that you'd want them to read about raising boys, would it be Raising Cain, or is there another book of yours?
Raising Cain is the one that became a bestseller, but that was because it came out the week before the shootings at Columbine. It was in 1999. And it wrote it with Dan Kimlin, who was a professor at the Harvard School of Public Health. So it had a lot of our public health concerns in it about drug and alcohol use and suicidality among teenage boys. So it's a little rough on parents of 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds. So I wrote two more cheerful books after that. One called Speaking of Boys, Answers to the Most Asked Questions About Raising Sons. And there are 91 questions in there, almost always from moms, but some from teachers and a couple from dads, about raising sons. And it's a Q&A book. I call it bathroom reading. It's, you can read it in small chunks and jump around in topics. And then I wrote a book that my publisher asked for, which is called It's a Boy, which is chronological. And it starts literally with a sonogram of an unborn child. And there are many parents out there who got the sonogram from after visiting during the time of pregnancy with that little arrow on it pointing to the penis, saying "It's a boy." And you got one of those, I can tell.
Yes. Two.
And it starts with thinking about raising a boy and what your fears might be, and it ends up with high school seniors. So every chapter is a different age, and if people want a chronological book, again, you can dip into it. And you can, check the age your son is and maybe double back on it and compare notes about his earlier time and maybe look forward a chapter. But I don't think parents of 7-year-old boys should actually be reading that much about 15-year-old boys. Parents should be enjoying their boy at the age he is.
Right. Yes. Oh gosh. Well, I need those ones. I'm going to pick those up. Of course, my boys are older now, but I've told many people that, I have 3 daughters. I had 3 daughters first. And, because I was a girl and still am, it was a lot easier for me relating to them. Right. So I have found myself, even though I'm an experienced parent, really going back to the books and back to the experts about boys, because it's just a different experience raising boys, and especially as they've gotten into teenage years, like pre-adolescent and adolescent, they change, and it's a natural thing, and just even their personalities sometimes they get less talkative, especially with mom, and so it's been really interesting picking back up.
Right, boys start to close down around 9 to 10, and then they very often really close down, some between 13 and 16, and it can be heartbreaking for moms because I think didn't have a good relationship with this boy. The demands for an early adolescent boy to think, I'm in charge of my life, I have to learn I have to command the respect of other boys. And my mother's voice makes me feel 11 or 10 again. I'm 13, but she starts to talk to me, and she knew me well. The technical term for it is the regressive pull of the mother. But a mother, even with her best intentions, how are you, sweetie? How are you doing? That makes a boy feel little again, and he may fight it. And they fight it by depriving her of information, which is very hard on moms. Right.
Well, I so appreciate it. I want to also make sure people know your website has lots of resources. It lists all your books and everything. It's at michaelthompson-phd.com. And there are so many resources on there. Before we started the recorded interview, you mentioned that you're kind of not doing as much speaking, but you're still speaking. What are most of the topics that you're still speaking on these days?
Well, I actually do trainings for teachers and camp directors on dealing with very anxious parents. There seems to be a steady supply of anxious parents, and school administrators are spending a lot of time trying to calm parents who have worries, some of which are real, a learning disability or something like that, and some of which are irrational. And so I'm talking a lot, and I think it's a factor of age. I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of situations. I do talk about boys, but I think most of my work is still on friendship and social cruelty in childhood. I have a book called Best Friends, Worst Enemies.
Oh, I have it in front of me.
People, well, I'm delighted. Thank you. But as you know, and I'm sure you've heard this as a camp director, there are parents parents who interpret hurt feelings or social meanness as bullying. And I'm often called to schools where the school's under attack for allowing bullying, and the school thinks this wasn't bullying, this was fourth grade girls being mean to each other. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing a lot of trying to help people sort out the difference between the inevitable conflicts of childhood and fourth grade girl relationships. You know, as a mother of girls, can be intense, and they can be up and down, and there can be hurt feelings. But that's a different thing than bullying.
Yes. Oh, this is right up my alley, and something that we are working on a lot at camp. I've been telling our counselors to think of themselves as social skills coaches or friendship skills coaches. And so again, instead of, labeling people or making, one event this overblowing something, instead helping kids learn what is appropriate to do and how to deal with something when someone says something that you don't like or upsets you, and what are appropriate ways to respond. And it is, I love that you're out there giving that message, because it is so
well, and you have to too, because there are parents who misunderstand what's going on at camp, right?
Yes, definitely.
Because they're living in a cabin. If 10 girls in a tent or a cabin, there's going to be social conflict.
Right.
Inevitable.
Yes, it was
inevitable.
For sure. Last week I was doing a first-year family orientation, and one of the kids asked, she typed in the chat box, "What if I don't like someone in my cabin?" And my response was, most definitely. There's probably somebody you won't like in your cabin. So what we do at camp, we always go with respect and kindness. And, we treat each other well, regardless of what we're feeling, and actually learning how to live with people who maybe you don't have as much in common with, or you think you don't like, actually is a really good skill. And it's interesting that, I think a lot of parents might think, well, move my child. I don't want my child anywhere where they're, experience any discomfort, but that's not realistic for life.
Right.
We're going to be...
Because
yeah.
There's going to be a child in the next cabin your child doesn't like either, or who doesn't like your child. That's inevitable.
And Michael, I just want to thank you, not only just for talking to me today, but also just for, you have, I'm sure it's probably hard to measure the lives that you have improved and changed from all of your books and speaking, and the wisdom that you've shared with parents. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of everyone, for sure in the camp industry, and also as a parent, just how much I've learned from you. You're just remarkable.
Well, you're very welcome. That's lovely for me to hear. At a time when I may not be writing anymore. So I'm glad my books have had an impact.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Michael. It's been an honor talking to you, and I will continue to follow along. I just saw your advice column on your website, and so many great things. And I'm going to get those books that you just mentioned about boys, because the only one I have is Raising Cain, and I want to go back and look at the other ones that are the more positive, not scary.
They're a little more cheerful.
Okay, thank you so much for your time this morning, Michael.
Have a wonderful summer.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, Auntie.
It was such an honor and pleasure to interview Michael for the podcast. For show notes and more information about the books we talked about and a link to Michael's website, visit sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 10.